Hi, I'm Wes, the Explosion, and I recently got my Game Boy set up again. Finally making it so that I can get the footage I need to do videos on the older handheld Mega Man titles. And as someone who's much more comfortable with the X games over Classic, what better place to start than with Mega Man Xtreme for the Game Boy Color? I never owned this one as a kid, only having the sequel to play on my special Pikachu edition. Me only getting around to playing this one on the 3DS a year or two ago, and yet, I remember very little about this one. While that doesn't bode well, at the same time, since I don't associate any sense of dread with Xtreme, it's probably not bad at least, so let's give it a look and determine if I've been overlooking a classic, or if there's a reason why I don't think about this one too often. The basic setup is that someone hacked into the mother computer and is using it to cause chaos and confusion. A Reploid named Mitty, who's a computer genius, rescues X when he's initially pulled in and explains that the problem lies inside the mother computer's core, though it's protected by the combat data of past Mavericks. Mitty then offers to help X by sending him back into the computer space to defeat these Mavericks, fix the core, and restore order. The writing's not really the strong point here, the details being a little sparse, but that is how a lot of the earlier X games kind of went, and it does enough to explain why you're fighting past enemies, rather than a new cast. Most importantly, it establishes that X is able to enter cyberspace and operate as just data, it's not just a battle network thing, and that this is further backed up by the stages for Cyber Peacock and Snipe Anteater later on, so it's not just a spin-off thing either. I bring this up for absolutely no reason. Moving on, it's Mega Man X, so you can jump, you can shoot, but since it's on the Game Boy with its limited face buttons, you can't quick swap weapons, and the only button you can map dash to, which you get immediately by the way, is start, since select is set to your menu. It feels a bit unnatural, but so does relying solely on the double tap, though pressing jump plus down to dash might feel a bit better if you just got done playing a classic game that contains the slide. As for armor, since you can't dash off walls, the foot part makes your wall jumps floatier to compensate, and still breaks blocks with kicks. And the rest do first armor stuff. Chest reduces damage, head for blocks that are above you, and arm gives you a higher charge level and lets you charge weapons. You need to get a complete armor set for there to be a visual change, but don't worry, just because you don't see X wearing his new boots doesn't mean that the game forgot to give them to you. Going back to weapons, they're all returning ones and do pretty much the same things they did previously. Though Silk Shot no longer gets held in front of you to pull stuff in, and Storm Tornado isn't as long and goes by faster, so it isn't nearly as good. No more just blowing through tortoises. You also get 4 Zero summons, all of which share energy, 3 of which do basic attacks at various angles, and 1 that does a ton of damage that Dr. Light even recommends for bosses that eats up a ton of energy. It's neat and kind of works in place of your Giga attack, but having to go into a menu, change tab, and select an option just to use it once is so tedious that I typically don't bother. You can also get both the Hadoken and Shurioken, both from the same capsule, though they work differently. You don't need to be at full health to use them, but you do need to be on the ground. Full charge plus up does Shurioken, and full charge plus down is the Hadoken. They're no longer insta-kills, Shurioken seems a lot more limited in range now, and the few times I used Hadoken on a boss, it seemed to do around as much as a full charge, so I'd say these are here more for style points. A few general menu things, you can save your game, rather than rely on a password. There's an autosave that you get 1 chance to reload before it's deleted, and if you restart the game, you can use this to get around to game over once. Checkpoints are these obvious blinking rectangles, so it's easy to abuse. There are also options for auto charge and rapid fire, which can be nice. Before I talk about stages, I should probably mention how this game is structured. There are 3 difficulty settings, normal, hard, and extreme. Each has the same intro and endgame Sigma stages, but normal has the stages for Chill Penguin, Spark Mandrill, Storm Eagle, and Flame Stag. Hard has Wheel Gator, Magna Centipede, Armored Armadillo, and Morph Moth. And Xtreme has all 8 for its regular campaign and cuts out all the story dialogue outside of Dr. Light. You unlock the next mode by clearing the previous, and you can transfer your normal save file into hard to carry over your weapons and upgrades for a nice starting boost. Essentially, you need to complete 3 playthroughs to get the full experience. Oh, and for the Sigma stages, there's X1 Sigma Stage 1, X2 Sigma Stage that has the Shurioken in it, which is obviously where you get your Street Fighter moves, and I guess the final stage from X1? Intro stage is Highway from X1. each regular stage has a heart tank and light capsule, with the 4 sub-tanks being split between both modes. Now, you may be wondering, why 8 capsules when there's only 4 armor parts? And that's a good question. In the hard mode stages, these capsules are where you get the 0 summons, but each also has an armor piece assigned to it so that if you're missing any, you can get that instead. I think this is pretty cool, since it saves you from being locked out of the full armor, though if you're starting without any of the pieces, the order is really rigid and requires a lot of backtracking. Now, actually discussing the levels, they're almost one-to-one for the Super Nintendo stages. Most of the changes are really small, like there being new nooks to account for some of the capsules that wouldn't normally be there, or the spots where upgrades were previously being slightly tweaked to account for gameplay limitations, like you not having boomerangs, so the sub-tank and mandrill stage now requires kicking some breakable blocks. There's also a few sections that are cut short, like one of the roller platforms or the heli platforms outside of Sigma Stage 1, which always throws me for a loop since I have to suddenly change gears earlier than anticipated. About the only stage that feels somewhat new is the final one, since you get the tower climb from X1, only the walls are covered with spikes instead of caterpillars, and you have to jump from moving platform to moving platform, complete with Eagle's flamethrowers, then get a boss capsule room, then go through a hallway with weak enemies to help you restock energy, then a boss room, then a cutscene hallway, then a final boss room. While that first part is a bit of a shock, the rest is so basic that it's not worth writing home about. I only bring it up because it's the only stage that's not pulled directly from another game. For the most part, if you're familiar with the original stages, you're familiar with their Game Boy adaptations. The bosses match the stages for each mode. Vava and Killable Ride Armor for the intro, then Chill Penguin, Spark Mandrill, Storm Eagle, and Flame Stag for normal, and Wheel Gator, Magna Centipede, Armored Armadillo, and Morph Moth for hard, all of which return for Xtreme, and for the Fortress stages, Boss Spider, Sergi's Tank, and the original X versions of Sigma. These are all largely the same, but there are some tweaks that you will notice, like Armored Armadillo blocking more, making it harder to drop his armor, Gator having more instances where he's invulnerable, and Spark Mandrill not letting you Spark Mandrill him, you being able to freeze and then hit him one extra time before he gets enough iframes to assure that he'll get to attack you once. Boss Spider also resets its web when it drops its smaller spiders, which is fun. It is also easier to beat Final Sigma, since you can just jump onto his hands, which seem to attack a lot less, and just camp, taking pot shots at his head. He also has some extra attack where he throws balls of energy onto the floor, which then shoot up, and he gets iframes that he doesn't blink for, so you kind of need to feel out when you can strike again. If all this sounds easy, since you've already beaten all these guys dozens of times, let me draw your attention to the smaller screen. You have so little room to move that dodging around Penguin or Sigma can feel impossible, and with you taking a lot more damage from collision than actual attacks, this can really suck. The health bars also look a lot longer in this one, somehow, and while weaknesses will do chunks, if you're lacking one, either because you just haven't beaten anyone yet or just aren't on the right route for the right weapon, it can take a while to defeat a boss. And before we wrap up this topic, I should also mention the 2 original bosses, Zane and Jamil. Zane is a golden armored knight with a huge sword. He mostly just jumps and swings, though he can also sometimes block, and if his leap is a little short, he'll start spinning around for a short stint. The strat is to mostly dash behind him when he jumps, but with how much floor space his attacks can take up, and how small his room is, while simple, he can still be a real problem. Jamil is a surprisingly heavy-looking ninja, throwing shuriken and riding a kite. While it's not too hard to dodge his attacks, as long as you're using the speed burner, I think it's pretty easy to just outdamage him. As for where you fight each, they pop up early with some extra dialogue if you enter the X-Hunter rooms from the X2 stages, and are unskippable fights where you'd normally face Vava in the first Sigma stage. They're not the most exemplary boss battles, but hey, at least they put something new in. The visuals are the same as the SNES versions, just greatly simplified, both in detail and color palette. Some of the bigger objects look pretty good, like parts of the environment and the ride armor, though others look really odd. Like, Mandrill's torso does not look like it matches his legs. I like pixels, and I know they did the best they could, but with having the original games there to compare to, it's easy to find the sprites here to be a bit lacking. I will say that the character portraits for some of the cutscenes are pretty nice though. The music is much the same way, just simplified versions of what we had on the Super Nintendo, but I'm a little more tolerant of it. I don't know. The original music was good enough that, since it gets the main idea across, I still find them enjoyable. And there's something kinda cute about the Game Boy Color's sound profile. Some of the sound effects feel a bit subdued though, so if you're listening for audio cues, it can be a bit harder to pick them out. Again, they did what they could. I'd say the game's kind of difficult, but mostly because of the hardware limitations. Unless you're one of those freaks who always uses the double tap to dash, not being able to map this to a standard button can screw with you. Not to mention that most times you'll be doing the floaty wall dash jumps whether you intend to or not. The smaller screen size, with X's sprite being proportionally bigger, makes it harder to dodge around stuff or see ahead. And sometimes things just don't seem to work right. The controls feel awkward enough on their own, but sometimes the I wanna shoot you button just wouldn't work and I'd have to hit it one or two other times to actually fire, possibly missing my window of attack. And other times, this would psych me out enough that I'd fire way too many times in a panic. Hardware might play a part, since when I did a quick Xtreme run on my 3DS, things went much smoother. I thought it might have been a problem with what I was using, so I tried playing Sonic Advance quick and that seemed to play fine, and I figured that'd be a harder title to run, so I'm gonna blame my issues on the original game. Because I was obviously playing this not on a Game Boy Color, but a Game Boy Advance, and absolutely nothing else. The boss battles have similar issues, the smaller space and controls really screwing you over, but beyond that, the changes in their iframes and the longer health bars, which can really drag things out if you don't have their weakness, tends to make them harder than they were in the past. Penguin and Eagle, who on the SNES I can beat without taking damage, here were kind of a pain due to screen size and no dash button respectively, though funnily enough, I think Centipede is actually easier here, just because you can hit him with the silk shot split without there being too many save spaces for him. When it comes to weaknesses though, because of how the modes are split up, it also means that you can sometimes just not have something for a specific boss, which can make the upgraded Buster important, and is just another way this game is harder in general. When it comes to the individual difficulties though, the standard mode is kind of hard because you start out baby, so that you're guaranteed to come up against one boss, Buster only, and probably pretty underpowered too. Hard mode definitely has the harder stages and bosses, but since you can carry over your stuff from normal, including the electric spark for Armadillo, it's actually pretty easy to just stomp all over this, even with the up challenge. Going right into hard mode sucks though, since a lot of the upgrades are hidden in ways that are hard to get without full armor, though it is doable. And Xtreme mode feels like a complete game. There's more to do, and you'll have 8 bosses to rematch in the final stage, along with Zane and Jamil back to back in the first fortress level. But since this is formatted more like a regular game, you can kinda just do things in the order you like, so even though it is harder, it still feels the most easygoing, and you really only have those hardware limitations holding you back. Overall, the game is challenging, but in a way where it feels like you're battling more against the Game Boy rather than Xtreme itself. Mega Man Xtreme is great for fans of the series when you're away from home and mom won't let you bring the Super Nintendo along, because it's screwed into the TV. Just make sure you bring plenty of AA's and a worm light if you're not going to be somewhere well lit. That would have been how I sold this game when it first released, but these days, it's a lot harder. This is another one where, if you're a hardcore fan, it's worth a playthrough. Or 3, for all the new stuff and for bragging rights. As for the new stuff though, all you really get are the light story elements, 2 bosses, and 0 summons. And as for bragging rights, all it really lets you do is add another title to the list of ones you've beaten. Oh, you've only cleared 8 X games? I've done 13. For everyone else, it's not just something that you can skip, it's something I recommend you do. An X game that looks a lot worse, plays a lot worse, with the smaller screen screwing you over, that you're pretty much forced to do 3 playthroughs of just to get the full experience, with minimal additions thrown in. Does that sound appealing? That's not to say the game isn't fun or it doesn't have its own charm, but I can't think of any reason to recommend this when the rest of the series is so easily available, outside of novelty. It'd be like telling someone they should play a demo or an incomplete build of a game when the full version is right there. With the Legacy collections being on Switch, Xtreme doesn't even have its one advantage of being the only way you can play X portably. You get out of here, Maverick Hunter. You had your week already. While Mega Man Xtreme had its purpose back in the day, I'm not sure it does now, outside of a curiosity, though that's just my opinion. Have you played Xtreme, and if so, on what hardware? Do you think it has anything over the original Super Nintendo games it's adapted from? And would you recommend it to friends and family? That'll do it for this review, a bit shorter than normal. Maybe Xtreme 2 will give me more to talk about. Thanks as always for watching, and maybe consider subscribing if you're into platformers, especially Mega Man. For everlasting peace!